Hi, welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager.
And I'm Brian Michael. Today, we have a very special episode. When I say very special episode, I actually really mean a very special episode. We are going to do our best of 2018. I want to say 19 so bad. 2018. And even though we're just starting in March, it takes a little while for a lot of these art house pictures or smaller pictures or films from last year to get down to where we're at, or up to where we're at, or to sideways. And so that's why we always do our best of every year a little bit later than everybody else. So even though the Oscars and all these other lists have passed, we're finally getting around to doing ours.
Yeah, and we're completionists. We like to see
We want to see as many as we can.
A lot of cramming happening in the last few weeks.
Yes. So I'm just going to start off with my number 10 through 6 and just kind of rattle them off because we're going to have to spend a little bit more time on our top 5. So with my number 10 was one of my favorite, well, actually, it was my favorite documentary of the year, Minding the Gap. That's an absolutely wonderful film that you can find on streaming. I highly recommend it, obviously. Number 9, Avengers Infinity War. This is how you do a big Hollywood film that wraps up 19 stories and brings them all together. Wonderful. Number 8 is an unusual love story in Border. That I absolutely was, well, I keep saying how much I love these films. Of course, it's in my top 10. But a very unexpected film. I highly recommend seeing the film without doing any research on what it's about. You can watch the trailer because it gives nothing away, but just go in and sit down and watch this film and just let it wash over you and be completely surprised and completely entertained. Number 7, this is where it gets tough because any of these films could be my top 5 and probably my top 1. It would be 8th Grade. An absolutely wonderful coming-of-age story. We seem to find one every year, and this one was just absolutely incredible. I can't recommend it enough. I keep saying that, but it's an absolutely wonderful, beautiful, funny, and sometimes awkward and painful, as one is when they're growing up.
It was really robbed from a screenplay.
Absolutely, yes. And then number 6, I'm going to mispronounce, is Capernaum, which is an absolutely incredible film. It's a foreign film about a lost child and his journey through trying to find his way. It's pretty heartbreaking. It stole my heart. I absolutely loved it. I'm going to add a little something here because I messed up when I sent in my top 10. You're going to be so mad at me. And I forgot to put Roma in there. And Roma would actually have been my number 6, and I'd bump everything up. So I'm going to put it as a tie as Ms. Capernaum, even though it isn't listed on the poster. There we go. Hey, it happens. I'm human. Roma, I don't know if anyone's heard about this film, but it's on Netflix. It's black and white. It's pretty amazing. And it was easy to forget since we talked about it ad nauseum for the last few months.
Yeah, I'm pretty shocked that you forgot
I don't know how it happened. Well, I do.
But I told you were going to like Capernaum, so I'm really glad you went and saw it, because I as soon as I saw it, I said, that's a Bryan film. He loves, those tragic type of stories. Yes. Okay, so my number 10 through 6 now, pretty similar to yours in some ways. My number 10 is also Minding the Gap. In my opinion, the best documentary of 2018. Don't let the fact it's about skateboarders keep you away, because it's really not about skateboarders. Number 9
is Infinity Wars. Please say Avengers Infinity Wars. Come on. No? Okay.
Number 9, Leave No Trace by Deborah Granick, a fantastic film with breakout, wonderful performances by Ben Foster and the young girl who plays his daughter, filmed here in Oregon. Just a fantastic film, very underlooked this year. Number 8, another tragically underlooked film, Can You Ever Forgive Me, by Mariel Heller, and starring Melissa McCarthy and Richard E. Grant, who should have won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, in my opinion. Fantastic performance. Melissa McCarthy's best performance of her career, and a wonderful, smart, adult, grown-up drama.
Yes.
We don't get enough of those type of movies. My number 7 film, and I have a feeling this might be on your list a little higher, I'm just guessing because you didn't name it yet, is Widows by Steve McQueen. Probably one of the best thrillers, caper films of the year, proving once again that Steve McQueen just continues, in my opinion, to make excellent films. He hasn't made a bad film yet, and Widows shows that he can also make something more approaching mainstream entertainment and a crowd pleaser. And it didn't do well at the box office, which was really disappointing because it really should have. Viola Davis should have been nominated. I mean, there were just so many great performances in this film, just a powerhouse. And especially in a year where there was so much focus on female performers, I have no idea why this one was so underlooked. And my number 6 film, which you mentioned, is 8th Grade by Bo Burnham. this was really close for me. I almost had this number 5. This year was really tough. I feel really strongly all my top 10 could have been almost in any spot. This is just a wonderful coming-of-age story, smartly written with a wonderful breakout performance by Elsie Fisher in the lead role. Just a wonderful, naturalistic performance. There's never a false note, not even once in her entire performance. She holds the screen for 90 minutes. She's in every single scene, and that's not easy to do at that age. So.
There's a few scenes in that movie too where you're like, oh, I remember what that was like.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of scenes that were, that were really hard, that you almost didn't want to identify with, that you could identify with, but that's what I think makes it a terrific film. And it's also very funny and heartwarming at times too. It has a wonderful mix of that. So in a year where it was a lot of really dark movies, it was kind of a welcome to have something a little lighter.
We didn't get to review on the show, Can You Ever Forgive Me, which I recently had saw to make it to see it, and I think it's my number 11. I didn't mention that. Yeah, it was my number 11 pick. I actually really wanted to squeeze this in, but Minding the Gap kind of beat it out. It is a really smart film. It's a very grown-up film, and it was very interesting to see. And it's one of those films where after I was done, I thought, I've got to look this up and find out more about the story, because I found it absolutely fantastic and fascinating that she was such a gifted writer, but she just didn't write about what would sell, and so then she found her way down this path. And
I know she was doing all these movies about old Hollywood that wasn't interesting to people anymore.
Yeah, but then to write those letters in those people's voices did enough to fool everyone, to say, oh my gosh, how wonderful and witty, and I thought that was very interesting. And so, and Melissa McCarthy is, I mean, wow, you don't even recognize
She's phenomenal in it. And she doesn't try to make the character too likable, which I really like. There's always this tendency to want to make someone cute, or she's she's a difficult person. I wouldn't say she's not a villain, but she's a difficult person. There's a reason she says I'm more of a cat person than a people person. So.
Oh yeah, big time. Okay, so then we're gonna move on to my number 5. Oh, I've got all of this elbow room and to wiggle room to talk about this film. My number 5 picture, which was my number 1 for the longest time. It's The Rider. This is directed by Chloe Zhao. This is a film about loss, and if you watch the show continually, you know that's something that's very close to my heart, and those are some ones I always tend to have high on my list, because I find this very fascinating and an interesting subject matter about a young cowboy rodeo rider who gets an injury. We start right off with him pulling staples out of the steel plate in his head. Not giving anything away, because that's how it starts right off, and from there on it's just kind of a wild ride, and how he has everything in his life just kind of taken from him, because he's no longer able to ride horses. He cannot perform in the rodeo anymore. He can't horse whisper or train horses anymore, which they show. One of my favorite scenes of the year was him sitting there and taming a horse, and how he approached the horse and speaking to the horse. It was absolutely amazing and mesmerizing. Just wonderful. There are amateur actors in this film, which I didn't have a problem with whatsoever, because what I thought was on screen was very truthful, very heartfelt. And the look of the film, oh gosh, I didn't write the cinematographer who also did God's Own Country. It's absolutely beautiful there in the, what do you consider Wyoming, the Midwest, and South Dakota, wherever out there. It's a beautiful looking picture.
Ranch land, shall we say.
Yes, and I just found his story so harrowing. I mean, it's just so hard when he has to get a day job, and then some kids approach him for an autograph and a photograph because they know who he is from the rodeo, because he's he's kind of a big deal in that circuit. And it's just kind of heartbreaking that this young man in his 20s has to redefine himself and to find a new way or a new path. And the big climactic scene where his father comes up as, I love that. It's just a wonderful, poignant film. And I'm looking forward to more of hers.
The first half of the year, this was your number 1 for the longest time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I saw this film and it knocked my socks off, and I was referring it to a lot of people to see.
And it is a very good film. I gave it 3.5 when it came out, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm eager to see what else that director has to do, because she's able to work with non-professionals, which is not an easy thing to do. I wouldn't say it's as seamless as someone like Sean Baker, but I would say that particularly his relationship with his sister, I thought was one of the highlights of the film for me.
So. Oh yes, most definitely.
Okay, so my number 5 film is You Were Never Really Here, starring Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix was in 3 great films in 2018 and somehow managed to escape notice in all of them. The Sisters Brothers, You Were Never Really Here, and Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot. I mean, he was just on a roll. But this movie in particular by Lynn Ramsey, just an extraordinary director who I'm becoming a huge fan of her work. Her previous films, Ratcatcher and We Need to Talk About Kevin, show that she's really interested in the darker side of humanity, and specifically the way people bottle up their emotions until the point where they literally explode. Joaquin Phoenix's character plays a for-hire, I don't even know if you'd really call him an assassin of sorts, who goes after child prostitution rings, and so he's kind of an avenging angel, if you will. People have compared this movie a little bit to Taxi Driver, although his character I wouldn't say is as creepy or as unstable, but he definitely has some issues. He has some PTSD. He's a veteran, and he's had some own abuse in his own life that we slowly get to see throughout the making of or as the film unrolls. A fantastic score by Johnny Greenwood, who's quick becoming one of my favorite composers for films. It just had a wonderful, dark, gritty feeling to it, and I felt this film was also very overlooked this year. So.
Yeah, you talk about Widows being a mainstream film made by an indie director. This is more of, I think it's more of an action. It's an indie action film. It's very
it's a taut. It's like 89 minutes, and it's unrelenting. So.
Yeah. All right. So my number 4 this year, of course, with a lot of racial tension happening in this country. It's always been there, but it's sort of on the front page, and certainly Spike Lee coming to the foreground again with something like Black Klansman. But I thought he was outdone by Carlos Lopez Estrada in Blind Spotting. This is certainly from the Spike Lee family tree, but I just thought it was the best Spike Lee movie I had seen in a very, very long time, about a young man struggling with his best friend, who's becoming as he realizes becoming a worse and worse influence, and he has to decide on what he needs to do while he's on probation. Of course, we do learn a little bit about the probationary system, which was fascinating in itself, and you really get to learn and love this character through his trials and tribulations throughout the film. And I've never felt so much tension before in this film that I had in this film. Mm-hmm. Certainly when he finds that we forget that he has a gun on him, and then there's a police car that comes up beside him, and of course this is his last day that he's on probation, and I thought that was just absolutely just tension filled. There's some great heartbreaking scenes in this film. There's a lot of great comedy in this film. I mean, it felt like Spike Lee films used to be. They did such a great job with being funny and having a message and having a point and just being grown-up entertainment. But it had a great look. Certainly, it had a great look with this film. I just love the comedy in it. There's little stops that they have, like at the hairdresser, and just kind of they go around, and you really get to see his world and all of his friends and those who surround him, and it just really puts you in a place. And I loved that about this film. This was my number 1 film for a while. It replaced The Rider for a bit. I was like, okay, what am I going to do?
Well, I will be talking about that one shortly.
Oh, I figured.
So my number 4 film is Shoplifters by the great Japanese filmmaker Kore-eda Hirokazu. Just a wonderful, heartwarming, character-driven story. This is really the movie this year that was about the characters for me. You get to know this family. They are a family of sorts, and what they have in common is they are living on the edge, and they are shoplifting to make their reality happen day by day. You have the father figure and the mother figure in the family, as well as the children. And you just see the way that they come together and then at times come apart. And the whole and this is Kore-eda's, I don't know how many films he's made at this point. Just one fantastic film after another. This one got a lot of acclaim, and it deservedly so. It's a fantastic film. It won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival and beat out a big amount of competition in 2018, and it was very deserving. So
it just won the Japanese Oscar as well for Best Picture.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's a fantastic movie.
My number 3 is one that Angela's already talked about, Steve McQueen's Widows, and pow, is this a great movie. If you're a casual film snob and watch the show, and maybe you're always into the art house pictures, well, here's your one. And if you're a fan of the show and you love art house pictures, but you want to be able to sit down and watch a movie with your other friends that like more mainstream films, here's the movie. This is an action film, but it is smart. It is grown up. It is surprising. It has some great twists that not everybody I knew thought that. It was certainly surprised me, and I love the twist in this film. A fantastic cast. Michelle Rodriguez is in it. The friends that likes the Fast and the Furious movies with her in it. She's in those, right?
Yeah.
She's in this, and she's incredible. Well, they were my pick for Best Supporting Actress. That were snubbed. Any one of the actresses in this film, I thought were absolutely amazing. And certainly a film where a lot of women have been coming to the foreground and standing up for themselves. This is a film that shows a lot of strong women. Just as any man would in a film where certainly they're going to be breaking the law, but we see that with men all the time in action films, and why not? So I just thought it was absolutely incredible. And, it's a really great film when Robert Duvall, one of my all-time favorite actors, might be the weakest part of the film. He's still really great because he's Robert Duvall, but that was the little slide plot in the film that I thought was like, you could have done without it. But Colin Farrell is so incredibly good in this, too. And the way that camera follows his limousine, and he goes from one side of town, one side of the neighborhood to the other side of the neighborhood, and everything changes. Absolutely fantastic. Beautifully directed, and that opening action scene where we were literally put right in it. I've never felt the dodge of trying to dodge a bullet so much in my life. That was absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
So,
and fantastic
Widows.
looking film as well. So a great one to see on as big a screen as possible as you can.
And
but
crank that stereo up.
Yeah. So my number 3 film is a movie that Bryan already spoke about a bit, but it is Blind Spotting. And this is one thing I want to mention is that the director, Carlos Lopez Estrada, directorial debut. It's a pretty darn impressive.
Yeah.
David Diggs and Rafael Casal, who played the two best friends in the film, actually wrote the film together. So they star in it and they wrote it. And it's very much, I think, based on some of their real experiences growing up in Oakland, which is where the film is set. And so it has a wonderful sense of place. I always like movies where you feel like a good sense of place. You really feel these characters are from this location. They're from this community. And then David Diggs in a great performance, showing, also, it's interesting, very much like PTSD, like the Joaquin Phoenix character in a different way. He witnesses something horrific, and it haunts him throughout the film.
Yes.
There's a really powerful scene in this film where he does a jog every day that goes through this park that's also a cemetery, and all these kind of the ghosts of black men all over the cemetery stand up at once, and he sees them. And it's just a really haunting, really amazing moment. But I also have to mention, it's also a very funny movie. I rewatched it recently.
It's really funny.
I rewatched it recently, and my husband heard me in the other room, and he said, what are you watching? You're cracking up a lot. It's actually very, very funny as well. So that's really hard to pull off, that mix of dark comedy, and pathos, and just some scenes that are also really, really hard to watch as well. So
Absolutely incredible.
yeah, fantastic movie.
Ooh, I can talk about my number 2? Oh, my number 2. Wow. If Beale Street Could Talk. This is a Barry Jenkins sophomore effort. Wow. And really, I thought that Moonlight, I thought maybe that was just a one-hit wonder. No one's going to be able to do something like that again. And wow, is this an incredible follow-up. An absolutely beautiful love story. The way it is told, and we get to see flashbacks that are just absolutely seamless and does such an amazing job. The look of this film. It's like jazz. It's just colorful. It's beautiful. The palette is just awesome. The performances by everyone. Regina King got an Academy Award, and deservingly so. That scene where she breaks the news to the family and talks to her husband is just, you put that in a capsule if you want to describe what film can do. Just put that in the capsule and send that out into space. Absolutely incredible. And this is a film, one of those, we just don't get to see love stories so much anymore. And it's not a schmaltzy, and it's not some sort of rom-com where it's a cute meet whatever. These two people who, you see their love story, they see how they met as children, how they grew to form a bond between. Yeah. And it's just such an incredible love story and a love song, and you just kind of have to experience it. And once you have, you're not going to forget it anytime soon. And the world's going to not seem as colorful when you go to the theater because nothing's going to touch this film for a while. But I just was mesmerized. Every scene was like, wow, that was such an incredible scene.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to watch this film again because I can just rewind and watch and just, I think you'd put it on random when you put the disc in and just watch any of those scenes and just, they're just incredible. Turn the sound off and you have an amazing moving piece of art. Oh, I love this movie, and it was so hard not to have it as number 1. It just,
Sort of like juggling this year. Yeah,
yes.
A lot of great films. My number 2 film is Roma by Alfonso Cuarón. You know, I rewatched a lot of my probably top 8 films as much as I could, especially those I hadn't seen in a while, like Blind Spotting. And Roma continues to just be an amazing achievement for me. It's a beautiful looking movie, it's a beautiful sounding movie, and it's also a personal story, which is really hard to make something this ambitious that's also really personal. You can tell Alfonso Cuarón had he poured every bit of himself into this film, including he did his own cinematography, which is very unusual. The lead performance is just amazing by the young woman who plays this domestic worker who is really kind of this, you know, very dignified, very still person. You know, she's very much at peace with herself in some ways, and she has this very difficult life, and we just get to see her as she interacts with this family and cares for these children and the role that she plays. You know, it's interesting, there is a measure that they do, and, you know, whether or not you put much stock in that or whatever, about, you know, how many films each year have at least 50% of the dialogue belongs to women. And Roma was the only film out of all the Best Picture nominees, even more than The Favorite, that had 90% of the dialogue was female. It's a very female-driven movie.
Even The Favorite?
Even more than The Favorite, which surprised me. Someone does the data on that. And Bohemian Rhapsody and Green Book had the least amount of speaking parts for women, but yeah. Anyway, so they do a measure on that, but it is a very female-centric film, which I also really appreciated. And I feel like it's a film we'll just be watching for years to come that's really going to stand the test of time.
Well, it's going to be on Netflix forever, right?
Well, yeah. But we were fortunate here in Salem. We got to see it on the big screen at our local theater, and I really appreciate and value that I got to do that, because the sound, everyone talks about the imagery in here, but the sound design is amazing. And that experience of seeing it with a group of people also, and seeing tears in people's eyes, and feeling people being moved. I mean, you can't really, you know, I mean, it's great if you don't live somewhere where you can't see it on the big screen, I understand, but there's nothing escaping that experience that communal experience of experiencing something like this movie for the first.
Yeah, an unforgettable film unless you're putting together your top 10 and you forget it. My apologies to Alfonso. He watches. So we'll go on my number 1. No surprise here. Angela can tell you what it is. It is Hirokazu's Kore-eda's Shoplifters. This was a film that I could not stop talking about and couldn't help but get a little misty every time I did. It's actually 2 pictures, really, to me. This first half of it, seeing this family, and certainly they're grifting, they're shoplifting, they're doing whatever they can on the fringes of society to be able to make things go and to make things happen. And then, but you know that something just isn't quite right. There's some secrets, there's things we're not talking about, but we just kind of hinted at. And then the second half, much like Roma after a beach trip, things change, and then we get to see behind the scenes, and some things start to unravel. And they unravel certainly in a tragic way, but not in a horrific way, but in a way that's just very touching and poignant and heartbreaking. I'm not going to talk about that scene, but just wonderful and incredible. Again, this is another film that builds in a complete world around these people. Even though you know what they're doing is wrong with the shoplifting and stealing, you can't help but fall in love with them. The actress Sakura Ando
fantastic.
Is just so incredibly good.
In our world, I know she would have been nominated for Best Actress.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, and perhaps won. Her performance is just so incredibly good, and the play that they have between her and her husband, they have a lot of conversations about, you know, hey, this is what we're going to do here, and I still got it, and I'm your man, and you love me, and they have this wonderful, playful relationship that's kind of back and forth, and even though it keep going, what is the relationship here? What's going on? You can't help but just fall in love with them. They're very charming and they're very sweet.
Really, the whole family too, including Grandma.
Including Grandma.
Who doesn't love Grandma?
Yeah.
When she gums that orange, I mean, it's also very funny. We forget to mention that. There's a lot of really funny, wonderful moments in the movie. When she gums that orange, when this guy comes around who she's suspecting is trying to gentrify the neighborhood, he's waiting for her to move out so he can take her property, and the way she just looks at him and then like puts this orange in her mouth. It's just a wonderful comedic timing.
Yeah.
And also they eat in every scene in this movie. I remember a movie in recent history where people were eating so much, which I thought was very fascinating considering how much of their focus is on survival. It makes sense. They're just constantly looking for opportunities for the next meal. And a lot of the meals look really great, so.
And I love how, and if I learned anything, which I love to learn when I watch films, they show you how to shoplift, that's fascinating and very interesting. But there's so many.
Not that you're going to use that.
Not that you're ever going to use that, but there's even when that conversation happens with the store owner and then I don't want to give anything away, but you know what I'm talking. I keep saying, you know what I'm talking about. The conversation, the comment that he makes.
I saw the movie too.
And that, there was just so many of those moments in the film that were just like, wow, that was so well done, and I really love this. And you start to know that once things kind of hit the midway point, when it's like I said, you kind of start to see what's going on, and the unraveling happens with the family. It's just heartbreaking, and it just hurts because I love this, and I wanted to see everything, them to do well and be happy and continue on. But things, reality comes in, and it just comes in such a way that it's so heartbreaking and beautiful, but you won't forget this kind of experience. If it had a wonderful, happy, sunshine ending, gosh, I would love that, but you can't. It sticks with you more.
May not be your number one
tragic.
film,
no,
if that was the case.
No, but you want an alternate universe. Maybe
although his previous film, Our Little Sister, had more of a happy ending,
yes.
and it was also very focused on family. And I think most of his films have been since Afterlife, which I do not think was as focused on family, unless you consider Heaven or something.
Well, the relationships the coworkers have, but
it's still about relationships.
The conversation the mother has with the son at the very end, that swipes me out. Beautiful.
Yes. Okay, so that was your number one. Yes. A strong year.
Yes.
And my number one, you've actually already talked about, but I will talk about it some more. And my number one film is If Beale Street Could Talk by Barry Jenkins. This is Barry Jenkins' third film after Medicine for Melancholy and Moonlight.
Oh, excuse me, third. Yes, right.
And Medicine for Melancholy, good film, solid 3 stars. Moonlight blew me away. And so, like you said, okay, did we know, was that going to be it for Barry Jenkins? Is he a flash in the pan? I think with Beale Street Could Talk, we can definitely say we have on our midst one of our great American filmmakers. As you mentioned, one thing I want to touch on is we don't get a lot of love stories in this day and age. Or if we do, it's something like A Star is Born, which has already been made 4 times before. We don't get a lot of original love stories. This is a love story, and this is a love story we believe in. We believe in this young couple. We can see that they truly love each other. They have chemistry. They're not bad to look at all, which of course we love from the old films. Who doesn't want to see, Ingrid Bergman and Cary Grant and these two young, gorgeous
Beautiful people fall in love with them?
Yeah,
It's
people.
not the worst thing in the world.
Cinematography, the palette, it looks like a painting in some of the scenes. Just gorgeous.
Even in that terrible apartment that they live in, looks amazing.
Well, yeah, because of the way he shoots it, it's like an artist studio. It's like the rain on the windowsills.
Oh, beautiful.
And wonderful performances across the board, including, of course, by Regina King's Oscar-winning performances. The score and the soundtrack. The score by Nicholas Britell, who worked with Barry Jenkins on Moonlight, is pitch perfect. It also has a wonderful jazz, soul, R&B soundtrack with not the usual type of... Every single thing in this movie, from the writing, the adaptation of this story from James Baldwin, is pitch perfect. And you just really can't say that about too many films.
How do you make this film under 2 years? After making Moonlight, then knock this out in 2 years? That's incredible.
Well, apparently he had been wanting to make this before, but didn't have the...
if it had been like 5 years, I'm like, oh yeah, this is 5 years to put this together. I could totally see that. Okay, so, well, there it is. There's our top 10 films of 2018. We certainly want to thank our amazing sponsors, our fantastic crew. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, listen to us on KMUZ, watch us on YouTube. There's also Corvallis here in Salem and Silverton. I want to thank my wonderful co-host. I want to thank you for watching. Have a great day and great movies.